I'm here with about 14 high school students from around the New York City area. This is the fifth week of their class in climate policy, climate science and policy. It's a new New York Times thing, and so the timing is great because obviously we've been tracking the treaty process. Can you introduce yourselves for them?
Yeah, so my name's Kaia. My name's Kaia Rose, and I'm from New York. I'm an independent filmmaker. And I'm directing a web series at the moment called Climate Countdown, so that's why I'm here.
And I'm Mann, and I am the producer and director of photography for Climate Countdown.
And we haven't checked it out yet, but we'll be doing that right afterwards. Can you just give a quick sense of what's going on there right now as a first starter?
So we've got the Eiffel Tower behind us, I'm sure you can see. And on this side of us, we've got a rally going on, so we can do a little turn for you guys. There's a bunch of people back there. We had Naomi Klein was speaking a few minutes ago, and there's a bunch of people gathered here today. This is a march that's been planned for a while, for a rally, because the people want to have the last say. So it's kind of the people have the last say with the climate decision coming out of COP21. So,
right.
And it's been a little bit unsure if they were going to allow it to happen, but it looks like the government has allowed everyone to gather today.
And were you there from day one?
Yes, yeah, we were there actually just the day before. Well, we got there 2 days before, so we were there on the Sunday before the talk started. At which point there were going to be big rallies and marches that were canceled because of the recent attacks. So that was an interesting kind of, everyone arrived being a bit unsure of what the energy was going to be like and what the kind of, how people were going to be feeling.
And what's the main goal of Climate Countdown?
The main goal is to kind of break down this really complex issue that is climate change and climate action into kind of more digestible bits, so you can really map out. What we're trying to do is map out the ecology of climate solutions. So kind of understand what the landscape of solutions are and how do we as citizens find kind of entry points for empowerment and individual actions.
And it's also, there's so much jargon around the climate world, and kind of breaking that down to make it more accessible to the everyday person, because it really does affect every single person. And I think sometimes the jargon can get in the way. When you hear it, it's like, I don't know what that is. Mind shut off. So now we're trying to make it accessible for everyone.
Including us, because we're kind of everyday people. So we didn't know much about the climate process, so we've been learning the whole time. So it's been kind of our journey learning it, and we figure if we can understand it, then we hope our audience can, because we're starting pretty basic.
And we also have a theme of post-it notes throughout the series to kind of, we ask people if, because they can go on tangents, so we ask them if they can put it on a post-it size version, a note, explaining what such and such is.
Yeah, it helps.
That's good. That's a really great exercise. That reminds me, Reader's Digest has some competition now. It's a standing thing for 100-word true stories. And I used that as a writing exercise in one of my classes. It's like just a great idea. So is there what do you think is the least well understood aspect of the problem? Have you gotten a sense of that yet?
Good question.
I mean, for me personally, it's kind of the complexity of the process. Every single issue that is here, Red Plus, Indigenous people, there's just so much around each tiny little piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And then putting that all into one agreement is just, it's kind of, I don't know.
It feels like they set themselves an almost impossible task to kind of really figure all of this out in one. And I think that's the same for me. It's like when you start kind of diving in, you find these issues that there's mitigation and there's adaptation and there's loss of damage and there's these work programs and each one has so many complex issues and kind of connecting these big global decisions and agreements to local action is one thing we're trying to do, and kind of how do you make that link, because all of this that comes out of Paris does have to then be eventually enacted on a local scale. Mm-hmm. But kind of understanding that connection and how these big kind of sweeping concepts actually become implemented it's difficult to untangle sometimes.
Yeah. The class I'm sitting in front of here, they several weeks ago they got split into factions of two or so, each representing one of the main interest groups or national. We have the island nations and the World Coal Organization and Greenpeace is in the room
Oh, great.
and the United States is here so they've kind of had to role play a little bit about how and I think that helps give it a sense of why this is hard because you start to see those. You see alliances and blockages all emerge once you start talking to each other from those standpoints. What's your who have you seen there? Have you met someone who really blew your mind as sort of in terms of a new voice or a new approach to this that you thought was interesting?
It's great being in Paris because thousands of people gathered here, and a lot of them without badges. So a lot of them don't even have access to the negotiations, but they're here anyways because they have something they want to bring. So we've been talking to a lot of indigenous peoples from different parts of the world, and that's something that it kind of brings the urgency to the table even more because it's not as far off for them. It's happening now. You know, people from Siberia where their land, the permafrost is melting, and it's their way of life is disappearing now.
Right.
And they're the first ones to be affected by all of it. And indigenous women too, even more specifically. There's places where the culture, they don't teach the women to swim, so if a flood comes in, the women have a less likely chance of surviving the men. I mean, it's just these things really blow your mind.
Yeah.
And hearing from it firsthand.
And I think when you're we're based in New York. When you're in New York, you don't get that perspective. You come here to a global conference. People come from all over the world, and you're suddenly face to face with people who are seeing it in real time.
By the way, there's a young filmmaker in the room here too, Simon Geisker, right there.
Hey, hi.
So if you ever need an intern when you're back in New York,
absolutely.
That sounds good. I'll take that on that.
He shot some interviews. Gavin Schmidt, the climate scientist from NASA on the Upper West Side, came and visited with us too to lay out the sort of the climate math. It's been a really, really interesting project. This is a new initiative for the Times, just getting back into education in a new way. Where do your film, obviously your film series you're doing is online, but do you have other plans for this? Is this going to be built out into more of a documentary or?
We're kind of figuring out what the future looks like right now. So we just released our 13th episode this morning before we headed to the rally, which is actually on youth participation because we've been meeting a lot of really energetic and enthusiastic and really smart young people here. We feel like they have a lot to add to the conversation. So we have a couple more episodes we're hoping to get out, and then we're going to kind of step back and see if season 2 might look more at implementation, kind of making those links between global and local.
Right.
And there is a possibility of making it into a film, but we're just kind of figuring it out.
Well, and to go back, to take a step back too, Kaia started with just a camera before I even came on board, and then, it really is a passion project for her and now for me, and we have a team now, so it's built up.
Wow.
And we've been talking to people for fundraising, and that's been an amazing process too, to keep building the team and keep building the movement.
And it's kind of organically been growing up to this point. So we had this this deadline of COP21 ahead of us. We were counting down to Paris, so that was kind of couldn't quite keep up with actually planning the future. But now that Paris is over, we want to kind of step back and figure out what the best step is and where the successes have been and where we could do better.
Sure.
And also, I think it's super important to keep the eyes on what comes out of Paris, because I think everyone's very aware here that they don't want the energy to drop because the conference has ended. Because it's been such a kind of a moment in time that the momentum is building up to. They want the momentum to keep going. So we want to be a part of that, definitely.
Well, I love what you said about following the implementation, meaning, as you're totally right. One thing that I think is really valuable about Paris, I have a piece running in the Sunday New York Times op-ed section about this is the first time in this process that the outcome is a process. meaning
Right.
Yes.
it's not they've ended the plan. It used to be like we need a treaty like the Montreal Protocol where it's all just one big package. Even that had sort of subsequent iterations, but it's really about a single instrument. And this is more about defining a process. Even Obama at the very beginning, his opening speech, he said, what we seek here is an enduring framework for creating progress. So it's a journey, not and the less it feels like we solve the problem with this like
Yeah.
meeting, the better off the world will be, to my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we've been hearing that a lot from people here as well.
Yeah.
Very aware that even if the agreement may not be as ambitious as some people want or as ambitious as we need to hit the goals that we've set, that we know it's a journey and that we need to keep ratcheting up that ambition. And I think that's for us, as citizens, that's some place where citizens, I think, can really play a part in keeping the pressure up and the focus on our governments and, holding them to what they promised and then keeping them, moving towards better and more ambitious goals. And then also the civil society, there's been a lot of civil society announcements and business announcements here and coalitions being made. So I think there's a big focus on everything happening on the periphery of the agreement as well as the agreement itself.
And people are ready. Civil society, businesses, everyone we talk to, they're ready for change and action. So that's really inspiring.
Yeah.
Have you thought about, when I was thinking about what you were saying about implementation and about how everyone from this meeting now goes home to 195 countries, and is there a crowd generated platform concept for tracking implementation? You have a lot of people with cameras or phones who could sort of contribute content to a open it up. I don't know. I'm totally blue skying here. I don't know. It came to mind.
No, that's a really good thought. Actually, we were part of a project called Pathway to Paris, which is part of Citizens Climate Lobby as well, and they just launched on the first day of the COP, or no, maybe actually sorry, a few days into the COP, they launched something called the Citizens Climate Engagement Network, which is it's doing that but without video, and it might that's not a bad idea. We should.
Well, video would be because it's so doable now, and then you would have this sense of the faces and people actually, this is what I've done. Here's a little snippet. We're just weatherizing homes in Ithaca, or you know what I mean. It might be interesting.
Yeah.
A solar drip irrigation in Mali. So, are there any questions among the factions here, the students? Simon?
Can I ask a kind of film question? So what have you been shooting? Has it been a lot of interviews, or how are you kind of telling this story? What's been your process so far?
Good question. Well, we definitely wanted to give it a feel of kind of a raw feel, because everything's happening right now, and we didn't want to make it polished because.
Well, if we took the time to polish it, then it would be out of date, basically.
Right.
So we're just trying to get it out as quickly as we can, so that it's bringing perspectives now.
Right. But in terms of interviewing, I mean, it is talking heads, but we're also trying to get.
Well, we're characters in it as well. So Eric's voice is from behind the camera, and I'm in front of the camera. So there's conversations between us, and we include me. It's very conversational. So it does sometimes feel a bit talking heads, but my voice is in there as well, and we try to keep it more like a conversation than an expert giving us a lecture, so to speak. So, and I think it's been important it's important to have a character, and it's also been good for us because we are learning the whole time. So to have our perspective in it, that sometimes we're asking really dumb questions. So
those are the best ones. Those are the best ones. The hardest thing when you're an experienced journalist on a beat is remembering the stupid questions, the simple ones, because you think you know stuff, and then that's the worst trap.
Yeah.
And
so often
sorry.
I tell people I don't know what I don't know. So
right.
When I go interview someone, I'm saying this is what I think I want to talk to you about, but you might have something completely different that I don't even know about. So please tell me if I should ask something else.
Right.